And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might happen to be. My name is David Newland. I'm an instructor for Veritas Prep. And today we have the GMAT Strategy Seminar, the 10 toughest critical reasoning questions. Okay, so go ahead and say hi in the chat box if you'd like to, and just be ready to participate. You can definitely put some answers in. For sure, ask me questions as we go along. And we're going to talk about, the 10 toughest critical reasoning questions. So you might be asking yourself, how do we define the 10 toughest GMAT critical reasoning problems? How are we going to know which of these are the 10 toughest, right? There are all kinds of ways that people could define the 10 toughest problems. Look at this. We got a bunch of folks from all the way from New York to New Delhi, from New York to New Delhi. So we got a lot of folks in today. So I'm happy to see you guys, and we're ready to talk about some great questions. And the 10 toughest problems, well, the way that we define toughest problems is these are the ones that people miss most frequently. These are the problems that people miss most frequently, right? Well, how do we know which ones people miss most frequently? Well, I personally have taught over 300 GMAT and GRE courses with Veritas Prep. So I can tell you which questions people miss most frequently in our curriculum. And we're going to look at a couple of those today. But luckily, with the official guide, which I'm sure you guys are all pretty familiar with, this is the 2021 version. The official guide to the GMAT, which of course is composed of official questions, is arranged in order of increasing difficulty. So for this seminar, I said, let me look at the final 10 questions in the official guide. That's questions 809 to 818. And I looked at these questions. I analyzed these problems using several criteria. The first criteria is I looked for the type of question. For example, weaken, inference, assumption. So all the different question types. Secondly, I said, let's look at the logic and or reasoning used in the question. And then finally, I looked at this through a lens that is unique to Veritas Prep curriculum, and that is to think like the test maker. Veritas Prep has a way of understanding what the writer of the test is trying to do and the mistakes they want us to make. The way that I like to put it is, how do they get good people, like you and me, to pick bad answers? How do they get good people to pick bad answers, okay? So let's look at these criteria. Let's start with the first one, which is type of question. Does anybody have an idea as to which type of question is considered to be the most difficult? Out of all the different types, strengthen, weaken, inference, assumption, evaluate questions, paradox questions. Anybody want to jump in the chat box there? Any idea which type of question is considered to be the most difficult? We got some assumptions in there. We definitely have assumptions. We've got inference. We've got boldface. We've got all kinds of things. So here's what I found. Sentence correction. Well, that's not critical reasoning, but sentence correction can definitely be tough. A lot of boldface in there as well. There's some interesting answers. So what I found out of the final 10 questions, I found 4 weaken, 2 paradox, 1 boldface, 1 strengthen, and the strengthen was to best complete the passage where they give you the underlined part. 1 inference and 1 most useful to evaluate. Okay, so you're thinking, weaken, paradox, weird. I don't see anybody having written either one of those 2 down as being the most difficult, right? So I said, what about the 10 questions just prior to that? So now we're looking at the 20 last questions. So now I'm looking at the 20 last questions in the official guide. And this is what I found. Here comes your assumptions. Here comes your assumptions, right? Now there's 3 assumptions. One of which is a plan question, asking you to support the plan. Then we have 3 boldface. So all of you guys that were saying assumption and boldface, okay, here you go. Now your questions are coming in. Then we had a weaken, a strengthen, an inference, and a paradox. And you know what that led me to conclude? That led me to conclude that out of the final 20 questions, in terms of difficulty in that official guide, there are weaken, boldface, paradox, assumption, strengthen, inference, most useful to evaluate, and plan questions. And you know what that means? That's all 8 of the categories that I break the critical reasoning down into. I break critical reasoning down into SWAM and then BIPP. Strengthen, weaken, assumption, most useful to evaluate, boldface, inference, paradox, and plan. All 8 of them right there. So you know what that means? That means that the difficulty on critical reasoning is clearly not primarily based on question type. Okay? You can have a really difficult assumption question, as you guys have talked about, or boldface question, or you could have an easy assumption, or boldface, or inference, or any of the ones you guys have talked about. So we need to turn to the next aspect. It's not about question type. It's about the logic and reasoning required for that question. This is where the true difficulty exists. So let's talk about 3 aspects of logic and reasoning that I found in those final 10 or 20 questions. Okay? So what are the types of logic and reasoning found most frequently in the difficult questions, right? Not just found most frequently everywhere, but found most frequently in the difficult questions. Cause and effect. It was really interesting to me that more than 5 out of those last 20 questions were cause and effect. That's why I've got this one in bold, because cause and effect played a major role in those 10 and even 20 of the most difficult questions. A quarter of them or more had this aspect. So this is something we really need to talk about today, particularly finding an alternate cause. And having an answer choice that is outside the box. Having a surprising answer choice. Having an answer choice that goes a little bit away from where the question was going. Okay, that's another way that these difficult questions had some logic and reasoning. And then finally, particularly with like an inference type of question or even a boldface or something like that, sometimes you've got to add it up. And that happens a lot on difficult questions as well. So let's look at examples of each of these. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to primarily use Veritas questions that have similar reasoning, because I want to leave these the tough 10 or 20th questions in the official guide. And it doesn't have to be the 2021. It could be the 20 or the 19 or the 18, whichever version you've got. All right? But we definitely want to leave you with those questions. Are the last questions in the OG harder than the initial? Yes. It actually says on the official guide, it actually says that they are in order of difficulty. So that helps you to know how to plan, right? Okay, so let's start with cause and effect, because this was huge. Cause and effect was a really, really big aspect of this. So I would love it if you guys could read through this whole question and think about the cause and effect. And I'll give you a little bit of time on this, and maybe some of you will even come up with an answer. You could put an answer choice right in the chat box there. So this is our first question today. A little bit of difficulty from it being kind of a big paragraph. All right, I'm just going to give you like 90 seconds on this. I know that's maybe not enough to take it all the way down, but see what you can do, okay? Take a look. Okay, just take like maybe 20 more seconds. Okay, so we got a couple of answers in here, and let's take a look. So let's try to find the cause and effect that's going on for this particular question. Okay? So the effect is that cars from the 1960s and 1970s that the mechanic inspects are in good condition. Okay? Remember, please listen, the effect is like the evidence. The effect is what's been observed. The effect is not debatable. It is observed. It is true. And it's what we're trying to explain. I always like to start with the effect. That's good, Harsh. That's really good. Exactly. You're right. I'm going to say, Kalyan, you're right about that one. Absolutely. So cars from the 1960s and 1970s are in good condition. Start with the effect. Now here is the supposed cause, which is, listen to this carefully, guys, E equals E. Effect is evidence. The effect is the evidence. The cause is the conclusion. C, cause, conclusion, E, effect, evidence, okay? So materials were supposed to be superior to those used right now. That's why the cars from the 1960s and 1970s are in better condition. So once you've got the supposed cause and once you've got the effect is true, right? Now we're going to look for that alternate cause, in particular for a weaken or an assumption. For an assumption question, which this one is, what you want to do is you want to block an alternate cause. Okay? So for a weaken question, you want to show that there's another cause. For an assumption, you want to block that cause. So what's a potential cause for the cars being in better condition? Harsh put it exactly, survivorship bias, right? What a great way to put that. So the alternate cause would be that the only cars remaining were well cared for, right? The remaining cars were well cared for. I mean, think about it. In the United States, at least, it's crazy to think about a lot of cars from the 1960s. You know, that's a 50-year-old plus car, right? The only cars that are remaining are the ones that the people cared for. So once you've got that as a possible alternate cause, you want to block that. And the one that blocks that, right, would be answer choice D. And we've got quite a few answer choice Ds in there. This is the one that would block that. Well-maintained and seldom used older model vehicles are not the only ones still on the road. Okay? Are not the only ones still on the road. It is similar to an official guide question, yes, and that allows you to leave the official guide question to try a little bit later. What about A? The quality of materials used in older model cars, listen to this one now, Just Cooks, listen to this one, is not superior to those used to make other types of vehicles. This is a really important aspect. We're not talking about other types of vehicles. This is why we have to read very, very carefully, because it says cars, right? Okay, cars, it's all cars. It's all cars. So it's not other vehicles. So maybe buses are still running, right, from the 1960s or 70s. I rode on a bus once that had traveled 2 million miles, and it was still in good shape. But we're talking only about cars, okay? Answer choice B is irrelevant. Cars built before 1980 are not used for shorter trips. Remember, if you have to make up for the answer choice, then that's not going to be the right answer. Because listen to the story. I call this telling a story. Listen to the story you'd have to tell for answer choice B. Well, when you drive a shorter trip, it doesn't put as much wear on the car. And if you drive shorter trips, right? Exactly. So for answer choice B, who knows that shorter trips could be more of a problem. If all you do is drive the car a couple of miles every day, it never gets to warm up. It might be worse for the car. You don't know. So don't make up for the answer choice, okay? Answer choice C, manufacturing techniques are not superior to those used in plants before 1980. Answer choice C goes the wrong direction, guys. If manufacturing techniques used in modern automobile plants are not superior, right, to those used in plants before 1980, this would help you to have the cars stick around. Answer choice E or D was the two answers we were down to. Well-maintained are not the only ones, or owners of older model cars take particularly good care. Answer choice E is the perfect weaken answer. To weaken this question, we would say that owners of older model vehicles do take particularly good care, because that would be our alternate cause. Okay? And remember, with an assumption question, you can also negate the answer choice, and the answer choice that weakens becomes a weaken when it's negated is the correct answer. So if I was to negate answer choice D, well-maintained and seldom used older model vehicles are the only ones still on the road, this would now become the alternate cause, right? So when negated, the correct answer will weaken on an assumption question. So I can see why a lot of you guys said that assumption questions are the most difficult, because they absolutely do bring us an aspect. Now let's look at a second question. If car instead of vehicles was specifically written, then would that be correct? Oh, answer choice A, would A be correct in that case? It would be far too direct. It would either exactly say what's written here, or it would exactly contradict. So I don't think they would say the materials used, which is the conclusion, and then down here the quality of materials used, which would again be the conclusion. So they wouldn't have answer choice A if it said cars and cars, because it would be pretty much exactly the conclusion. Okay, the next thing is an answer that is outside the box. In other words, what if the question we were just talking about, D was right. D was right. Yes, because it's an assumption. D was right because it's an assumption. Okay? If it's E, then it's going to be a weaken. What about an answer choice that's just straight up outside the box? What if we were talking about cars and suddenly it said like the quality of oil changes or something, right? Then you'd be like, wow, so, you know, that's kind of weird. Well, let's look at a question that has cause and effect and outside the box. Okay, so here we have our second question. This question is going to be a weaken, because we're going to most strongly counter. So if you can find cause and effect, find an alternate cause. Okay, so this is question number 2. Take like 90 seconds on this one. Okay, so take a few seconds more and see if we can come up with an answer on this one. Okay, I'm seeing the answers start to roll in, and so that means that I know that you guys are ready to take a look at this one. So we're looking at the city official, okay? The first thing you have to do is be able to decide what the city official's conclusion is. The city official's conclusion is that we are preventing violent crime. Okay, how do I know that the city official's conclusion is that we are preventing violent crime. How do I know that? Because the city official says you overlook the fact. When one person says to the other, you're wrong, then that person's conclusion is the opposite of the other guy. So the conclusion from the citizen is that you have a decreasing ability of your law enforcement system to prevent violent crime. And the city official is saying, no, 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 we are preventing violent crime. Okay? So that's the conclusion, right? It's also the cause. The effect is this. The number of murder victims per 100 people has actually fallen slightly in the city since 1970. So what we're saying is that the number of murder victims per 100 has fallen. That's the effect, that's the evidence, that's observed. And the conclusion, which is their supposed cause, hey, we're preventing violent crime. That's why the murder rate's down, okay? Now, a bunch of you took the trap answer, which is answer choice C. I want you guys to notice that answer choice C actually strengthens and does not weaken. Okay, answer choice C goes the wrong direction. Check this out. Look at this. Murders and other violent crimes are more likely to be reported now, right? Are more likely to be reported now than they were in 1970. So in other words, not only do we have a lower murder rate than we had in 1970, but back in 1970, there were a bunch of murders that weren't reported. So our murder rate is really lower. So that's a tricky answer on C. Be careful with a weakened question. One of the best ways to catch somebody out is with an answer that strengthens. So answer choice C is actually that trap answer because answer choice C strengthens, okay? Is the effect a premise? That is correct. The effect will be a premise. I prefer to call it evidence, Jadip, but yes, a premise or evidence. And the conclusion is you overlook the fact, which means we are preventing violent crime. That's right. You guys ready for the answer? There's a few of you that have got it. Shabendra's got it, and Bavuk has got it, and Pratamesh has it. A bunch of people have it. And that is this. Think outside the box, guys. What does the quality of healthcare have to do with the murder rate? How is it that we're looking at the quality of healthcare? Well, the effect that we are trying to explain is a lower murder rate. The supposed cause is preventing violent crime. But the alternate cause is, hey, there's just as much violent crime, but with better health care. That's why people are surviving. That's why people are surviving, because of the better health care. So the correct answer to this question is going to be, let me go backwards. The correct answer to this question is going to be answer choice E. If the health care received by assault victims last year had been the same quality as in 1970, the murder rate would have turned out to be several times what it actually was. If you look at this question as a cause and effect, it's going to help you get to answer choice E, because they're saying the cause is preventing violent crime. Many, many weakened questions, half, possibly, of weakened questions involve cause and effect. And that is even more true with the questions at the back. Oh, we'll look at D, but the questions that are the most difficult in the official guide, cause and effect was there time and time again, okay? This is a high level of difficulty, this question. Yeah, this is high. Okay, we're going to go over C, we're going to go over D, we're going to go over E. Okay, so answer choice C, as Jadip has said, answer choice C actually strengthens. Okay, because listen, the murder rate is lower now than in 1970. And look, murders and other violent crimes are more likely to be reported now. So some people must have been murdered in 1970 and we don't even know about that. So not only is the murder rate lower right now, but it's really lower, okay? So answer choice C goes the wrong direction. We're trying to say that we are not preventing violent crime. We're not trying to say that we're even doing a better job. So C's out. What about D? The number of law enforcement officials in the city has increased at a rate judged by city law enforcement experts to be sufficient. Now remember, with a weakened question, if you want, cause and effect is amazing, but if you want to take weakened questions down to their very essence, here's what it is. You got to go for the opposite of their conclusion, okay? The conclusion is we are preventing violent crime. That's what you want to weaken. So you need to say they are not preventing violent crime, okay? Answer choice D doesn't tell you we're not preventing violent crime. Look how beautifully E works. Look how beautifully E works with this, right? If the health care received by assault victims had been of the same quality as in 1970, the murder rate would be several times higher. We're not preventing violent crime. There are assault victims in all them hospitals, right? So answer choice E does what we want. Look at how answer choice D does not tell us that we are not preventing violent crime. Answer choice D says the number of law enforcement is sufficient. When you break it down, that's what answer choice D says. Answer choice D says the number of law enforcement officials, right, is sufficient to serve the needs. That doesn't tell us that we're not preventing violent crime. So remember, on weakened questions, at the very least, you have to make sure that you go for the opposite of their conclusion. The city official wants you to think that we are preventing violent crime, right? We need an answer choice that says we are not. Answer choice C doesn't tell us we're not preventing violent crime. Answer choice C says, yeah, there were a bunch of murders back in 1970 that we haven't even counted. I mean, that doesn't do it. Answer choice A is not violent. Fraud is not violent, although if you're a victim of fraud, you probably have a different idea, but fraud's not considered a violent crime. And then answer choice B is just an unnecessary fact. So if you look at answer choice E, it's really two things. This answer choice E is definitely thinking outside the box. Were any of you prepared that the answer choice would talk about healthcare? Right? What does the quality of healthcare have to do with the murder rate? And the other thing we have here is an alternate cause for that lower murder rate. Not that you're preventing violent crime, but that the people are being saved rather than dying. Okay, so it's a really interesting question, and I would love for you guys to be able to think outside the box, but we got to be careful here. Thinking outside the box is for strengthen, weaken, paradox, plan questions, and what most people call evaluate questions, the ones where they say what information is needed to evaluate. Think outside the box for all of those, but not for inference or assumption, okay? You do not think outside the box for an inference question or an assumption question, because an assumption is what you must have. You're not going to suddenly come up with a whole different topic like healthcare for an assumption question. And for an inference question, of course, you have to add it up, okay? So think outside the box, be ready for answer choices, again, on the more difficult questions. As I was looking through those last 10 or 20 questions in the official guide, I saw several questions there where I said, wait a second, we weren't even talking about that topic at all. And here comes the correct answer, which is about something different. Healthcare is different than the murder rate, but it's the right answer. So that's our second one. The final one here we're going to do is add it up. So for this add it up, I wanted us to actually take just a peek at the stimulus, not the entire question, but just the stimulus for an official guide. So this question is actually going to be from the official guide. We're just going to look at the stimulus together. Added up questions are often inference. If you're going to add it up, you're often going to add up an inference question, right? Something like, if he wins, then this person is elected, and then this person is appointed, something like that. So you're adding up the premises with an inference. And many have to do with numbers and statistics. And this is where people get into a little bit of trouble when numbers and statistics and things like that come together with critical reasoning. Okay? So let's look at an added up question. This is an official guide question. Some of you may have seen this stimulus, but I really wanted to look at one of the official ones so you could see a little bit about what's going on here. So this is an inference question. Go ahead and read this, and we're going to add it up together. Okay. When I teach the math sections, arithmetic, algebra, data sufficiency, I have a kind of a famous mantra that I say. When I first see a math question, I may give myself a couple of seconds where I say, oh no. But then I immediately snap out of it and I say, what do I know? And how is this simpler than it appears? I want you to do this for critical reasoning. Okay, some of you are here today because you're great at math and you're working on the verbal, right? You need to do the same thing that I do in math, you need to do in critical reasoning, okay? Now, every time I see a critical reasoning, I say, you know, let's go. Because this is my stuff right here. This is my jam. I love it, okay? We're going to do sentence correction on Friday. We're going to do the 10 toughest sentence correction questions. Same time this coming Friday. I love sentence correction too. The verbal, I love it, right? The math is more of a challenge sometimes. For you guys, maybe the verbal, some of you, right? Look at this question. You can take a moment to go, uh-oh, this looks like something. But then, how is this simpler than it appears? Somebody can solve this thing in 2 minutes, right? Solve this thing in 2 minutes, right? And then also think about, what do I know? So if we look at this question, let's see what we know. We know two things. Now, I've got this in blue and red, but obviously this is not evidence and conclusion because this is just an inference question, right? So we know that the review of the information in 1994, the review revealed that in every year since 1963, the agency's projection of the GNP for this other country, what it would be 5 years later, was a serious underestimate. What? Yeah. So every 5 years, they made a projection, right? This country, Marut, made a projection of what Goro's GNP would be. Just slow it down, figure out what they're talking about. And that 5-year projection was always wrong, okay? They made a projection every 5 years. It turns out their 5-year projection was always wrong. And here's what we can see in the red part. The review also revealed that in every year since 1963, the agency estimated Goro's GNP for the previous year very accurately. So what do we know? We know that every 5-year estimate was an underestimate, but that was looking forward. But we know that when they estimated the prior year's GNP, they were accurate. Okay? Prior year's GNP was accurate. So how can we add this up? Well, there are several trap answers to this particular question that might sound good but don't add up. For example, a trap answer on the fluctuation of GNP. You tell me where this says how the GNP fluctuates. Does it tell how Goro's GNP fluctuates? It just says they underestimated it, right? Don't try to prove them. Don't try to prove them. Oh, estimate was every year. Sorry, that's right. Pretamesh, that's right. Estimate was every year for 5 years. Exactly. So every year they estimated the next 5 years. Thank you, Pretamesh. So that's exactly what they did. And they were wrong every time, right? But the previous year they estimated accurately. Whether Goro intended to mislead. This is the kind of thing that you have to really watch for. Intended to mislead. Where do you get the word intended? Does anybody see anything here about what Goro, I mean, Goro wasn't even necessarily, it was Marut's people that were wrong, you know? So you can really look out for that. They don't forecast well. Jadeep, I like that. If the estimates of Goro's GNP impacted Marut, do you see how these things are going beyond? This is one of the 10 most difficult. This is from one of those 10 most difficult. And I'm going to tell you right now, none of these 3 answer choices would give me 1 second's pause. Right? Exactly. That's right. Yonikaler. The 2020 estimate in 2015 was wrong, but for 2014 it was accurate. Exactly. So right here, the one thing that does add up is exactly what you've just said. The agency had evidence pointing to their 5-year projections being inaccurate. Okay? Jadeep said maybe they can't forecast well. Exactly. Exactly. So nothing about how the GNP fluctuated. Nothing about whether Goro intended to mislead. Nothing about if it impacted Marut. This is one of the hardest 10 questions. And by me breaking down those 3 answer choices, they're longer than that. But by me breaking it down, I think you guys are with me. Who's going to pick one of those, right? It doesn't say anything about whether it was an intentional misleading. It doesn't say anything about how it impacted Marut. The harder the question is, the more you need to simplify, okay? So whatever you do, don't start trying to make up for the answer choices that aren't there. Don't try to help the answer choices along. Only pick the answer choice that's going to add up, particularly with an inference type of question. We need that answer choice, only the one that adds up. And as we can see here, they were wrong for the 5 years, but they were right about the previous year, so they knew they were wrong about the 5-year projection, right? That's what it is. They knew because they very accurately estimated the previous year. So if we look at Jonikaler's example there, in 2021, they know that their 2020 estimate made in 2015 was wrong. So they know, they have reason to believe that they are not accurate. So sometimes we've got to add it up. But listen, guys, difficult reasoning. Cause and effect, answer choices outside the box, add it up. To be prepared for these challenging problems, you need to think like the test maker. And I'm going to give you three aspects of think like the test maker. Okay, remember, think like the test maker is how do they get good people to pick bad answers. There are people that are out there right now trying to figure out how to get you to pick the wrong answer, even though you're motivated, you're educated, you're prepared, right? How do they do that? And how do you stop them? Well, here's how we're going to stop them. You're going to always look out for what they didn't have to say. That's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to start with that. Always, when I read a critical reasoning stimulus, I'm comparing what we already know to what they say. And if they make a leap between what we know and what they want to get to, that distance right there is how I know how to solve that problem. And I'm going to show you one that has something that they didn't have to say. Be on the lookout for cause and effect. We're going to go back to that again because, again, it was like 6 out of 20. The 20 most difficult questions, like 6 of them were cause and effect. So we're going to go back there again. And then, oh, here's the one, avoid mental inertia. The last time I took the GMAT, I always get a 51 on the verbal section, and I did on the last time I got a 51 again. And I had 20 minutes to spare. So I didn't miss a single question. I had 20 minutes to spare. Now, I haven't taken it since they shortened it. So this was back when there were still 41 verbal questions and 75 minutes. But I was done in under an hour. I didn't miss a question, and I was not in danger of missing a single question. I knew every answer was correct because, like I said, verbal, I know what to do, right? But listen, the one thing I could feel them doing on the exam was this. They were trying to get me to pick answer choices, not based on what was on the screen, but based on something up here. Mental inertia means that you are, Kalyan, I haven't gotten a perfect quant score yet. On the GRE, yes. Haven't gotten that perfect quant score yet on the GMAT. You know why? Because smart people like you guys keep driving up the quant problems, the difficulty. It's your fault that I haven't gotten the perfect score on the quant yet. You guys keep driving it up, all you smart quant people. So mental inertia is them trying to get you to answer based on your own opinions. But it's not opinions on things you would think. It's not opinions on hot button topics like world peace and disarmament and free press. It's opinions on mundane little day-to-day topics, and you'll see what I mean. All right, let's start with looking for what they didn't have to say. You guys ready? Okay, for the following question, I'm just going to put the stimulus up first, and then we'll go to the answer choices. Stimulus first. What did they not have to say? Okay, what word or phrase? So here you go. You guys can type it in, word or phrase that you think they didn't have to say. Okay? Okay, let's see what you guys have put in. Countries, fringes, aquifers, aggressively. Oh boy, these are all really good notions. Nobody's quite landed on the one I wanted to go to yet. Okay, so let me pretend I'm reading this one. Okay, let me pretend I'm reading this one. Environmental groups protesting the use of the new technique for mining around the fringes of aquifers. Okay, so people are protesting. I will stop at the end of that sentence and I will go, okay, people are protesting. What? Why? Why are they protesting? These groups complain that such mining will lead to instances of contaminated groundwater and sinkholes and other disasters in areas near the proposed mining. Now, if this was my full critical reasoning lesson, I would give you right now the 6th way to identify the conclusion. You guys ready? The 6th way. A negation word like the word but. So listen, everything that comes before that negation word, like but or however, is not the evidence, is not the conclusion, and is not to be focused on. So the important word that I'm thinking of is not going to come not going to come before the word but. It's not going to come before the word but, okay? Because this stuff up here is just talking about what the author of this argument denies. You see what I'm saying? If I said to you, other people say this about sentence correction, however, they are wrong. The truth is blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to tell you my evidence and then say, however, it's wrong, right? I'm not going to say that. So this, starting with the word but, is going to be the, since this is a weekend question, is going to be the evidence and the conclusion. Okay? So, but as the mining companies are quick to retort, the countries already using this technique have not reported. Stopped in my tracks right there. In my mind, as I'm reading this, right, the countries already using this technique have not had. In my mind, I'm looking for the word had. Okay? So let me give you an example. Are there any problems with harassment at your company? None that we've reported, right? The difference between reported and had is the key to this entire question. The word you're looking for here is they've not had any groundwater contamination or other problems. Therefore, it's safe to proceed with the new technique. This is the conclusion. The conclusion is it's safe to proceed with the new technique. The evidence is this. The countries using it have not reported any contamination or other problems. And that's exactly right, Kalyan. That does not mean they don't exist, right? If you're interviewing at a company, exactly, Yannickler, that's exactly it. If you're interviewing at a company and you say, have you had any harassment problems? And they say, none that we've reported. And you say, I've got some other companies I need to interview with. I'll see you guys later, right? So that's the thing. Reported is not the same as had. Asking why the word reported is used is the key to this question. So it may take some practice on your part. What I recommend is sometimes reading a little more slowly, a little more carefully in terms of the stimulus. And if you remember things like this, which are things that I talk about in the Veritas critical reasoning lesson, you're not focused on the first half of this question. 50% of the verbal section, critical reasoning, sentence correction, and reading comp, 50% of the verbal section is what I call background or not to be focused on. Okay, and here's the 50% on this critical reasoning question. If it's not the evidence or the conclusion, it shouldn't get your full attention. Okay, shouldn't get this full attention. Okay, so now I'm going to let you guys look at the answer choices. You ready? Here are the answer choices. Now remember, you're concerned about them using the word reported. Okay, so now type in whichever one you guys think is the correct answer when you get there. I'm just looking at all those correct answers coming in, starting with Pooja. I'm just looking at those answers and I'm loving it. Do you guys see how the correct answer is there when you understand the question and the stimulus, okay? Listen, don't spend all your time with the answer choices, please. You want to spend more of that time. The answer is C. You guys are all right. You want to spend more of that time with the stimulus, and you want to spend more of that time understanding. When I look at this question, I'm going to spend 80% of my time right here. And when I go to the answer choices, I'm going to know what I'm looking for. I actually call this a mantra. Mantra? I try to roll the TR. I actually call this a mantra. So this is one. Yeah, it will be. Don't worry, Baruz. It'll be recorded for sure. A mantra equals what the answer must say. And the reason why I'm 100% certain on official problems, even when I'm taking the exam, is because I go to the answer choices knowing what the answer choice must say. Okay? And you can practice that too. It's something you can absolutely do. Now, we've already looked at 2 cause and effect questions. But here's an example of a stimulus from an official GMAT question. Just the stimulus. I'm not going to do the whole problem. I don't want to ruin it for you guys. But I want to look at that stimulus because I want you to spot cause and effect in a tough question. And maybe some of you have seen this before. Look how long that question is, right? Look how long that question is. Yeah, the GMAT Club. Listen, for the YouTube channel and the GMAT Club, a lot of great stuff there for sure. All right, let's look at this. And let's see if you guys can spot cause and effect in this big, crazy weekend. It's another weekend question. Just take a few seconds on this. Try to make it simpler than it first appears. That's not only for the math section, that's for the verbal section. Let's make this simpler than it appears. There's a bunch of stuff going on here, okay? There's a bunch of stuff going on here. But if we look at this, we can see that even if you've seen this question stem before, the stimulus before, this paragraph, this problem, we're looking at this in a different light. There's cause and effect here. And this would be a great way to look at this question. So remember, the effect is the evidence, it's what's observed. So the effect here is this. The control plots yielded significantly more larkspur seeds than did the dandelion-free plots. That is the evidence, that is the, there you go. That is the evidence and that is the effect. What is supposed to be the cause, right? Leading the researchers to conclude that the presence of dandelions facilitates pollination and hence seed production in the native species by, and this is exactly what Jogtej was saying, more pollinators to the mixed plots. That's the key, right? That's the key. Pretamesh has it as well. You guys have got this, so this is what we're looking at. The effect is more larkspur seeds in the mixed plots, okay? You don't need to know what larkspur is. You don't need to understand this entire stimulus. You need to understand the conclusion and the evidence and look for cause and effect, right? And what do they say the cause is? Dandelions help attract more pollinators, right? Dandelions help attract more pollinators. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. I am going to tell you that this question is in the official guide, at least 2020 and 2021, at least the last two. So you can go back and answer it. But I am going to tell you this, the correct answer is going to be an alternate cause. There's going to be some other reason why there's more larkspur seeds in the places with the dandelions other than attracting more pollinators. It's going to be something else, okay? And when you look at that, if you go later, you will absolutely be able to spot that alternate cause. You will. I'm leaving you guys hanging on this one. I'm leaving you guys hanging on this one. Okay. And then finally, I can't believe we're on to our sixth and final question. You must avoid mental inertia. And I saved the best and most difficult for last, okay? This is when you let your thoughts and opinions guide you to the wrong answer. It's the test maker's favorite trick for getting good people to pick bad answers, okay? This is their trick for getting good people to pick bad answers. All right, here we go. This is a best completes the passage. You'll notice based on the word because right here that this is going to be a strengthened question. When you see best completes the passage, which has the blank, I want you to think two things: inference or strengthen. The vast majority of fill in the blank questions are inference or strengthen. The word because is a premise word. This is a strengthen question, right? So here we have a strengthen question. So what are you going to do for a strengthen question? You're going to get their evidence, their conclusion, and bring them together, okay? And most of you are going to pick the trap answer. I'm just going to say it now. Watch for mental inertia. I'm warning you. I'll give you a couple minutes on this question since it's our last one and it's the best one. Okay. This is something. You guys have got a lot of correct answers in here. First of all, what is the evidence? What is the conclusion? So the evidence is that there is a false positive result The evidence is that there is a false negative result. So the evidence is some people get a, whoops, that's the time right there. Let's stop that. There we go. I didn't give you guys the full 2 minutes. I was too anxious when I saw those. So there is such a thing as a false positive. There is such a thing as a false negative, okay? And the conclusion is a physician should use the test that gives the smallest percentage of false negative, listen, in order to most accurately determine food allergies, okay? In order to most accurately determine. So is Pretimesh correct that the answer is A because it shows why the false negative is dangerous, or is Untitled correct because it shows in answer choice E that the positive is inconclusive? So the mental inertia here, the mental inertia is trap answers A and C. The two big trap answers are A and C. And by the way, this is a very difficult question. Now, we got a lot of correct answers on this, which is remarkable. When I do this in class, there's no way we get 20% right answers. At least 80% of people get this wrong. This is a very top level question. Mental inertia, listen, there's a false negative, right? A false negative is dangerous. You have an allergy and you don't know it. We've all heard about false positives and false negatives with COVID tests. Hold on. Geez, sorry about that, guys. Right at the end, my timer went off twice. So, dangerous, you have an allergy, but you don't know it, right? That's according to the stimulus. Here's the mental inertia. The mental inertia is your mind says we have to minimize the danger. You see what I mean about them having you do, something in your own head that's not on, and it's not like controversial. It's not controversial to be worried about having a false negative on an allergic reaction. But this question is not about minimizing danger. This question says, to most accurately determine food allergies, a physician should use the test that gives the smallest percentage. It doesn't say to save the most lives or something like that. It says to most accurately determine. Okay, so it's what Untitled said a little bit. Untitled said a little bit earlier, which is this: the question we have to ask ourselves is, if you have a false positive and a false negative as ways to be wrong, there are two ways to be wrong, right? Why only false negatives? If we're looking at two ways to be wrong, why only false negatives? Why are, in order to be most accurate, why are we only looking at false negatives? It's kind of like this. If the GMAT and your GPA were the two most important aspects of being admitted to business school, what if I suddenly came in and said, only focus on the GMAT? You'd say, well, what happened to the GPA? Why am I, if there's two different aspects here, why am I only focused on one of them? Well, it's exactly this. All tests for food allergies have the same proportion of false positive results. That means that we cannot use the false positives as a way to differentiate. It's as if we said all people have, as if we said all people have the same GPA. If all people have the same GPA, we can't really use that in admissions, can we? Then we got to look at the only thing we do have left. Okay, now what about, A was a really good trap, wasn't it? What about answer choice D, though? Answer choice D says the proportion of tests that do not provide a clear result is the same for all tests of food allergies. That's close to being E. The reason why E is better is because false positive and false negative are mentioned as two ways to be wrong, right? Versus just not providing a clear result. I'm not sure if not providing a clear result is a measure of accuracy. Because, right, if a test doesn't give a clear result, then we just take another test. So answer choice D, not as good of a version of answer choice E, okay? The proportion of tests that do not provide a clear result is the same, okay? So it doesn't say proportion of false positives. Yeah, answer choice E is the one that says false positives. Answer choice E is the one for that. So tough question, and this particular question, mental inertia, right? Answer choice A and answer choice C, great trap answers. All right, so the toughest GMAT critical reasoning problems are defined as those that people miss most frequently. In terms of the official guide to the GMAT, they are the last ones in each section. Difficulty is not really based on question type. We find all 8 of my types of questions there. Learning how to think like the test maker will give you the advantage you need on the toughest problems. Now, some of you were kind of sad that we only had this one. Yeah, I'll come back on that in just a second, guys. I'll come back on D&E in just a second. But some of you guys were kind of sad. You were like, wait a second, we only got an hour of this. Well, actually, you can take the first session of any Veritas GMAT course as a trial, right, for no charge. Make the tough critical reasoning and this tough test a little easier. Veritas has the best test preparation, 99th percentile career instructors. Think like the test maker curriculum, which is what I was going over today. Best live online platform. It's like this. It's high definition streaming. And when I teach, it's at this board, okay? And here are some of those. If you want to step in on one of those classes, you can come into the first class, which is really all about logic. So it's a great class. January 12th, we have an advanced GMAT course. We don't always do that, but that one's on January 12th. That's Tuesday through Thursday, 7 p.m. January 16th, we have a Saturdays only class if you want to take a little bit longer. For example, that one's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time, so about 2 hours before we started today is when that would go. This one's good for people that want to take it a little bit slower. My next course is 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time starting January 18th. And you can see we have a course January 26th, January 30th. More options at veritasprep.com. So definitely join us. If for nothing else, take advantage of that 3-hour initial class where we go through all the different question types with a bunch of great techniques. So you can try any of those. I'm going to go back real quick to answer choices D and E, and then I'll put it on that slide to end, okay? So just really quick, D is wrong because not providing a clear result does not have the same impact on accurately determining food allergies. Think about it. You go in for a test. I don't think you need proof of score for the advanced. You just need to be ready for the course to be advanced, right? So it's kind of like you've got to use your judgment for that advanced class, the one that starts tomorrow, the advanced one. So to most accurately determine food allergies, if you go in to get tested to see if you have, an allergy or COVID-19 or whatever, and they don't get a clear result, right? That's not going to really determine the accuracy. They're going to give you another test or a different test. But what if you go in there to get a test for an allergy or for COVID or whatever it is, and they tell you that you do have it when you don't? You see what I'm saying? So answer choice E covers a much more important aspect. Not providing a clear result is not as big a deal in being accurate about food allergies. It's much more important to know false positives and false negatives. Okay? So, all tests for food allergies have the same proportion of false positives. What does that mean? It means that if you give 100,000 of test A, 10% of those are going to be wrong. If you give 1,000,000 of test B, 10% of those are going to be wrong. So they have the same level of accuracy or inaccuracy. That's what proportion means. Okay, so this is exactly the wording you want. Proportion of false positives, that means they're equal. Okay, if you do 100 critical reasoning problems and you get 90% right, and I do 10 problems and get 9 right, we're doing the same. So that's where that one's at. Okay? All right, so I'll put this slide back up, and be sure to join me on Friday. Be sure to join me on Friday at the same time for the 10 toughest sentence correction problems. So that'll be great as well, okay? Let me know if you have any other questions. Type them right into the chat box. Thanks, everybody. You guys were really great and very active today, and I hope you learned a little bit about critical reasoning. Yes, you sign up at veritasprep.com and you could try out tomorrow's lesson, or you could try any of the other ones that are mentioned. That's the first lesson for any of the courses. Thanks.